At first, I felt slightly invaded. My spiritual place was being represented by killers as a vile act of nature and was being put up on a pedestal on an international platform by the media. I'm an educator of arts in schools, and so I come across a lot of young people as part of my job now. When you're a young person, you're looking for your identity and your place in society. And if you feel detached from society in that sense, you're going to look for reattachment elsewhere. If there is none around in your immediate environment, you're going to look elsewhere. And if there looks to be a force on the international platform that seems to be on your side, doing wrong things, but for the first time someone is on your side, as a young person, it can be very misleading. It can be very, very misleading, and especially to vulnerable young people. In my work, I am an educator, I'm a teacher. I'm very careful what I say in classrooms because I know one small thing that somebody, another teacher can say, or I can say, a young person can latch onto that, and it may mean something completely different, something that they could misinterpret that.
I, first of all, think that the sense of belonging is massively important. The major thing that we've heard again and again over recent months is that young people go off and join Daesh because they feel as though they do not belong in this country. So, in a sense, who is to make them feel as though they belong? It's not the Muslim communities themselves. The major action has to take place from the wider community, the non-Muslim communities. And we have to do an awful lot to build up that sense of belonging, that sense that Muslim communities, Muslim people are valued in our community. The Muslim community feels as though it has to react too much to every major issue that happens in the world at the moment. The Oldham Mosque Council so often has to react to some press release that's taken place, some event that's taken place in the wider world, and they find themselves scurrying to react to that, to say, we don't agree with what's going on. And that's very important, but it is always reacting, and there has to be so much more that's done. One of our local Muslim communities, the Oldham Muslim Centre, decided a few years ago now to have as one of their 6 priorities the idea of building relationships with the wider community. Not to do dawah, but just to build relationships with the wider community. Unless it's one of those priorities that you have as a mosque or a church, I think that we become too self-referential. We become too closed in on ourselves. And a necessary part of living as any community is also about building relationships with a wider group of people, not simply existing for yourself.
The Prime Minister talked about British values. British values are no different than values of Islam, because first and foremost, we are all one family. As we're human beings, we are one family. We need to care for each other. That's why Islam teaches us. It teaches us killing one person is killing all of humanity. So when your child basically knows these values, truly Islamic values are, then they will not do anything or act in any way which will harm others. As a community, we can look out for each other. And that doesn't mean that only if you're among Muslim community, I mean about everyone. As parents, we teach our children what Islam really is. It's not from whether they heard it from this one or that one, then they will go haywire. They need to know the true roots of Islam. Islam does not enforce its religion upon others. The teaching of Islam properly, in a proper manner. And as parents, we are the ones you can tell them right from start that this is what they should be learning. True Islam. Not what they got some extreme someone who's been brainwashing them. So we need to be in contact with our children.
Every time you turn on a news, the chances are there'll be something about Muslims, or something about terrorism that's going on. And that actually has a psychological impact on the mainstream society as well, because it's actually creating in their minds that as if the whole Muslim community is part of this terrorism. What I've found is that the community on the whole is for preventing radicalization, but what we need to be careful about is the methods that we use, because currently the methods that are being used seem to be alienating the community, and through alienation chances are you will actually create more radicalization and extremism than if you actually take the community on board. And without the community's support, I believe that the government will not succeed in this, because they need the community to be on their side. But the only way they can be on their side is if you don't alienate them, because at the moment they're not feeling part of the agenda. They're feeling as if it's an agenda being imposed on them, and they're not being consulted on it. My own personal view is that the community needs to sort of reach out to, say, the neighbours or people they work with and integrate with them. That's one aspect of it. But the thing is, it cannot be done on its own, because the thing is, it has to be done both ways. If you're reaching out to somebody, then that somebody else has to also reach out.
As Muslims, we feel like we are double victims. Initially, when the terrorist attacks happened, Muslims are killed during those attacks. And then the heavy-handed legislation that follows to protect the public, again, Muslims are victims. I think the government's counter-terrorism and security strategy is counterproductive, simply because the vast majority of Muslims feel targeted and further marginalised, especially when there are legislation that are coming into being that specifically target Muslims. It isn't being helpful. Most recently, the Prime Minister's comments about Oldham, the race riots that we did have didn't produce radicalised individuals, and the Prime Minister's comments discredit all the hard work that our communities have put together to build bridges between our communities. It was unfair for the Prime Minister to make links between madrasas and, again, radicalisation. So this heavy-handed approach isn't helping with relations between the Muslim community and the government. I think the government needs to rethink the training that's available for frontline staff, frontline professionals, teachers, doctors, social workers. They really need to be equipped to deal with the problem of radicalisation and extremism, to avoid embarrassing mistakes like the child who was recently reported to the authorities for spelling terrace house as terrorist house. I mean, what I'm trying to say is, if there was a potential case, or even if it was an overreaction, then just making a phone call to Mufti Hilal to find out about a particular child, because of their links with masjids, you know, the teachers will probably know the family, or they'll be able to get some more intel. So it wouldn't waste government resources. A lot more interaction between the local authority bodies and local community organisations to further understand the Muslim lifestyle and the Muslim way of life. That would possibly help. And building upon the links that we already have, and if I could single out the Oldham Mosque Council and the work they do with the local safeguarding board, that type of relationship will help.